Well, the Knicks are not dead yet. The Knicks playing the most competent, complimentary game of basketball I think they've played this entire series. I think that's pretty easy to say. Holding Indiana to only 94 points is a big accomplishment there. And doing that when you're only shooting 27% from three, you win the turnover battle, you win the rebound battle. The Knicks played their best game, I think, of the entire series. However, Tyler, now the question comes, can the Knicks go back on the road, a place they've already won in Indiana, and do it again and just try to keep this series going? If you're Indiana, you just need one. If you're the Knicks, you've got to find a way to keep on scrapping to get this back home for a game 7. It is going to be interesting to see. Let's get into game 5 a little bit first. This was a game where the Knicks just found a way, kept fighting and fighting in the first half, but once they got a big enough lead, you kept waiting. Indiana would make little pushes here and there, but the Knicks defense stepping up tonight and just slamming the door shut.
Well, you used the word scrap a second ago. That's what they did. They scrapped. This was New York Knicks bully ball, right? This is what you've been waiting to see from them in this series. And you get your big performance. I say big. It's getting routine for him pretty much. Jalen Brunson, a solid 32.5. Karl Anthony Towns, talked about him a few games ago, having kind of a potential pivotal moment. Had a great game again tonight, 24-13. Needed that. And you got those other contributors we've been talking about, right? Bridges, Anunoby, Hart doing their thing. So that was huge. And on the Indiana side, boy, for as much praise as Tyrese Halliburton gets, and rightfully so, he was not there tonight. And really, for a large part, the majority of Pacers were not there tonight. Pascal Siakam and Benedict Mathurin just, were the only two that provided some spark. So that was a bit wild to see. I can't say it's shocking, but you just didn't feel like this was what was coming for the Pacers after that huge game 4.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it. When you're coming off a 30-point triple-double with 15 assists, just about anything you do was going to
feel turnovers.
Yeah, 0 turnovers. Anything you do is going to feel like a step down from that unless you keep providing at that same level. But Tyrese Halliburton, this is how he is, though. And I mean, this is where that overrated moniker, I think, came into effect, is that he'll have an insane game and then he will have one of these. Now, what does this mean for New York? You can probably expect him to go back off in game 6. You're gonna see the aggressive Tyrese Halliburton again. Miles Turner, what were you doing out there sometimes? Miles Turner's kind of the same way almost, where some days he looks like a good stretch 5, and some days it's like, how are you on an NBA team? That's just where the Pacers looked tonight. Aaron Nesmith, I know he's injured. You can't go out there and drop 1 for 8 in a game where you're trying to close it out. There were a lot of odd pieces for Indiana tonight that just really didn't fit. Siakam was short on a lot of his shots, and some of that's the defending of Towns. And we'll get into Karl Anthony Towns in a minute, because I think, considering the circumstances for him, if he's already a bit injured, he showed up to play. But this Indiana team, it's pretty simple. You still won the 3-point battle, but you've got to find a way to stop the Knicks' points in the paint. They just absolutely bullied them, like you said earlier, Tyler. Over 40 points in the paint for New York. I mean, there was a point in the game where there was only maybe a 15-point difference between points in the paint for New York and total points for Indiana in the third quarter. I mean, they're not even combining what all New York was doing. That's no free throws, that's no threes or anything like that. But Jalen Brunson was on a mission from the start of this game that we are not losing at home. But we are going to get this to a game 6. We are going back out to Indiana. Came out absolutely on fire. And Towns, just going to work. 24 points, 13 boards. Was getting inside. Was just forcing Indiana to make adjustments. And Indiana really couldn't do anything about it to Towns. Because even if Towns missed, this is where the big story, I think, of the night once again shows up. The 11 offensive rebounds for New York. Just someone was always hustling in there, tapping it around. Josh Hart with 3 offensive boards. He had a so-so game and then really stepped it up in clutch time when he needed to. Landry Shamet as well. Landry Shamet with a +4 in this game. DeLon Wright with a +4 in this game. The Knicks bench, if the Knicks are going to find a way to fight this back to a game 7 and win this series still, that bench is going to have to step up. The defense is going to have to step up. And you see what happens when all of this comes together. You look like the better team.
Yeah, and you mentioned the contributions of Wright and Shambin. We talked about that after Game 4, where if New York's gonna, like I said, be able to do what they do, some of those bench guys that hadn't been called upon a lot would have to do something. And the fact that they come out positive on that plus minus, that is humongous for New York. Anytime they could get that because of how the rotation is and how Tibbs likes to keep it tight. So if they're able to do that, it just gives that extra little dimension, I think, for New York that's needed. And obviously they had a renewed commitment to say, hey, like you said, we're not losing at home. We're not going out this way. And so that factored in as well. But can you keep that momentum? Can you keep that making that trip back?
Yeah, and that's going to be the tough part, I think, for New York is going against an Indiana team that they're going to have that crowd back behind them. They're going to have a motivated, even more so, I think, Tyrese Halliburton. Their bench is going to want to step up. They're going to try to push the pace a bit again. But that was something that Indiana had a bit of trouble with tonight. Just several turnovers that just seemed like they were speeding themselves up, trying to make the pass that was going to be there instead of the pass that was actually presented in front of them. There were a few what I like to call unforced turnovers where you just, you throw past a Turner and he's not ready yet. Yeah, he's going to be open. He's turning the corner, but he's not there yet. You don't have to make that. That's something where the Knicks defense that's a big win for them because you didn't have to do anything. That's a turnover that you and I could technically force by standing there. Just, oh, there goes the ball. Out of bounds. Okay. Great defense by us. We didn't do anything.
Well, and generally it's a problem, Cade. What's interesting about that, we've seen it. We watch high school games a lot in our area. We see it at the college level where a team gets used to playing at a certain speed, and then for whatever reason, sometimes, and usually it's a sign of not immaturity but lack of experience. They start speeding themselves up too much, right? They think they just go 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 go. Typically, you don't see a team do that in the NBA once they've kind of learned how to play at the pace they want. So but for whatever reason, there are times that this Indiana team just reverts back to that to a degree. I don't know what necessarily causes that. And, Halliburton, for as much flack as he might take over this, I will say this team, in a lot of ways, lives and dies by what Tyrese Halliburton provides, right? When he's on it, I mean, they just look like a whole different team. They look like a team that you could put up there with the best of the rest in the league and you can make a case that they have a shot. But when he's just not quite right, the rest of the team feels that, and I think that's what you're seeing throughout these playoffs and throughout this series.
I think so. The final point I really have here for the Knicks, the only real negative I guess you can take away from a 17-point win with the Cat, especially the four fouls in the third quarter. That's something he's going to have to be smarter about because we saw what happened. Mitchell Robinson comes in, he's playing more minutes inside, and then what does Indiana try to do? They start trying to attack in, draw that extra foul out, and then what do? They go to the hack a Mitch on the other side, and that felt like the moment. There was a brief shot where Indiana got this down to a 10-point game where it turned to, oh
Yep.
no, it's happening again. Here comes Indiana. But then New York, credit to them, just responded back right back. Mikal Bridges, 6 for 12. Didn't make a three. Didn't get to the line. Had an okay 12-point day. Other days we would have said that's a bad day for him. But when you're pushing inside, when you're forcing Indiana to have to deal with these types of shots, and okay, you have to start packing and packing and packing the paint and allowing someone to get open somewhere else, that's huge. That allows an OG game where he's only 3 for 14, where he doesn't play that well offensively, but his defense is able to make up for it. Those are the type of plays you need to see from the Knicks going forward. If you could continue to just spread the bench out, I don't think it's crazy to say the Knicks can come back and at least take this to a game 7. I think the Knicks fans might have a point here. If they can get that win, I mean, how do you start a 3-1 comeback? You got to win at home. That's what the Knicks were able to do. You got to win 2 of the next 3, which are home games. The only difficult one in terms of that extra added on is game 6 being on the road because we know crowds can affect things. People like to act like it doesn't. These are professional athletes. You would think that doesn't get in their head as much. It absolutely can. Indiana is going to throw a big punch at the beginning of the game, going to try to get that kill shot early and see if they can run New York out of the gym. If the Knicks can hold on, kind of like we talked about with game 3, that first 6-minute period, if the Knicks are winning, they're going to feel confident and it's going to be a fight to the end. If Indiana's up and it looks like momentum is all with the Pacers, it's going to be a long uphill battle for New York.
Yeah, I want to get back to that point you made about the fouls, which fair point, and we've seen it bite them not only with Karl Anthony Towns in the series, but Brunson had a game
Yeah.
like that. And the problem with that is though, with the way how Coach Tibbs demands and what he demands of his defense, you're going to have some of those days where you play that physical style, and because that's what is demanded of you, and you're going to get the unfavorable whistles. So it's, can you make sure, not necessarily can you avoid those fouls, can you at least string them out enough to where you're not putting yourself in a bad situation early? Because I think, and I see it with the Thunder a lot too. People
Yeah.
want to complain about Lou Dort and him just taking out people, this and that. Lou Dort gets called for a lot of fouls, but he does it in a way he's able to string himself out on those. And yeah, he might wind up with 5 fouls, but that fifth foul will come out usually towards the end of the game. He's good about not putting himself in a bad spot early.
Yeah. The other thing for the Knicks, free throw shooting in this game is bad. Didn't make that much of a difference today, but 15 for 22. We'll see if the Knicks can clean that up. Yeah, 68%. They're not the greatest in the world, but any day you can shoot that bad from beyond the arc and at the stripe and still get a 17-point win, rely on your bench a little bit, rely on that defense to be positive. You're going to take that. I mean, yeah, it's going to look ugly, but that's sometimes how this works. That's the nature of the playoffs.
That's the nature of the Knicks. What do you mean?
That is true. You're not wrong about that. But folks, as always, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell as well, and leave a comment down below. We always appreciate hearing what you have to say. If you're on Spotify, give us a 5-star review over there. But folks, until next time, have a good one, everybody.